Malaysia has demonstrated a strong commitment to international maritime governance by ratifying 31 out of the 69 major international maritime conventions currently in force worldwide, comprising 30 conventions adopted under the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and one key convention adopted under the International Labour Organization, ILO, namely the Maritime Labour Convention, 2006, MLC 2006. Overall, the global maritime regulatory framework consists of 68 IMO conventions and protocols covering ship safety, marine environmental protection, navigation rules, security, liability, and facilitation of maritime transport, together with one core ILO Maritime Labour Convention addressing seafarers' welfare and employment standards. Malaysia's ratification of these 31 international instruments reflects its alignment with internationally accepted requirements for statutory ship certification, environmental compliance, navigation safety, and crew welfare protection, and places Malaysia among the active flag states supporting harmonized global shipping standards, although differences remain when compared with countries that have ratified fewer conventions. Differences in the number of ratified international maritime conventions between countries can create significant operational and regulatory implications for ships engaged in international voyages. In this case, Malaysia has ratified 31 international maritime conventions, comprising 30 conventions adopted under the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and one convention adopted under the International Labour Organization, ILO, namely the Maritime Labour Convention, 2006, MLC 2006, while Country A has ratified only 21 conventions out of Malaysia's 31 ratified instruments. Since Malaysia implements these conventions through its national maritime legislation, foreign ships entering Malaysian ports are required to comply with applicable international standards, regardless of whether their flag state has ratified those conventions. This requirement is supported by the No More Favorable Treatment principle, which ensures that ships from non-ratifying states are not permitted to operate under lower safety, environmental, or labor standards when visiting ports of ratifying countries. As a result, vessels registered under Country A may be subject to additional port state control inspections, verification of statutory certificates, and requests for equivalent documentation such as statements of compliance issued by their flag administration or recognized organizations. If deficiencies are identified in areas such as ship safety equipment, pollution prevention measures, crew certification, or seafarers' welfare protection under the Maritime Labour Convention 2006, the vessel may face operational delays, mandatory corrective actions, detention, or in serious cases refusal of entry into Malaysian ports. These compliance gaps may also affect insurance acceptance, charter party eligibility, cargo delivery schedules, and commercial reliability, potentially increasing operational costs and logistical complexity. In some situations, shipowners may need to arrange alternative routing strategies, such as delivering cargo to a nearby compliant port before transferring it to Malaysia through land transportation. Therefore, differences in convention ratification between Malaysia and Country A directly influence statutory certificate recognition, port accessibility, regulatory compliance obligations, and the overall efficiency of international maritime transport operations. Conversely, Malaysian-flagged ships calling at ports in Country A generally do not encounter compliance issues because Malaysia has already ratified the same 21 international maritime conventions adopted by Country A. However, Country A cannot legally impose deficiencies under the additional 10 conventions that it has not ratified but Malaysia has ratified, since port state control inspections are normally limited to conventions that the port state itself has adopted and implemented through its national legislation. As a result, Malaysian ships operating in Country A ports may not be inspected against those additional convention requirements, although they remain fully compliant under Malaysian flag state obligations. This situation demonstrates how differences in convention ratification between countries can create asymmetry in inspection authority, certification enforcement, and regulatory expectations during international ship operations. Under the Port State Control Inspection Framework, deficiencies identified onboard ships are normally categorized according to their severity and required corrective action. Detainable deficiencies, Action Code 30, refer to serious deficiencies that make the ship unsafe to proceed to sea and may result in immediate detention until the problem is rectified. Rectify before departure deficiencies, Action Code 17, require corrective action prior to sailing but may not necessarily result in full detention. Other deficiencies, Action Codes 15, 16, or 18, refer to minor or operational issues that can be rectified within a specified time frame, such as at the next port of call or within a defined compliance period. In the most serious cases, a port state authority may detain a vessel within its jurisdiction if the ship fails to comply with applicable convention requirements enforced under national law. However, Enforcement action is limited to the legal authority granted under the port state's merchant shipping legislation, subsidiary regulations, and ratified international conventions. Therefore, unless supported by national legal provisions, the port state cannot impose enforcement actions beyond its jurisdiction, but it retains the authority to delay departure, restrict operations, or deny port entry until deficiencies are properly rectified in accordance with applicable maritime safety and environmental protection requirements. In Malaysia, the implementation of 31 ratified international maritime conventions, comprising 30 conventions under the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and 1 convention under the International Labour Organization, ILO. Namely the Maritime Labour Convention, 2006, is primarily carried out through the Merchant Shipping Ordinance 1952, together with subsidiary legislation, ministerial, regulations, and Malaysia Shipping Notices, MSN, issued by the Marine Department Malaysia. These instruments collectively form the legal mechanism through which International Maritime Convention requirements are incorporated into Malaysia's domestic regulatory framework and enforced on Malaysian ships and foreign vessels operating within Malaysian jurisdiction. According to Section 518 of the MSO 1952, the Minister is empowered to make rules and regulations necessary to give effect to the provisions of the ordinance, and once published in the Gazette and laid before the House of Representatives, these rules carry the same legal force as if enacted directly within the ordinance itself. In addition, Section 519 authorizes the Minister to revise statutory fees prescribed under the ordinance, allowing adjustments related to certification, inspections, surveys, and maritime administrative services. Importantly, under Section 519A of the MSO 1952, the Director of Marine has the authority to issue Malaysia Shipping Notices, MSN, covering administrative and technical matters related to shipping operations, navigation safety, maritime transport security, and marine pollution prevention. These notices may apply to specific persons, individual ships, or classes of ships, and where prescribed, non-compliance with Malaysia Shipping Notices constitutes an offense. In practice, many amendments to international maritime conventions or newly ratified convention requirements are first implemented through Malaysia Shipping Notices to ensure that shipowners, operators, and maritime stakeholders comply with updated obligations before those requirements are formally incorporated into subsidiary legislation or published in the Gazette as PU-A regulations. Furthermore, Section 20 of the MSO 1952 provides that all Malaysia Shipping Notices issued by the Director of Marine prior to the enactment of corresponding regulations remain valid and legally effective, as if they were issued directly under the appropriate provisions of the ordinance. Any administrative decisions or enforcement actions made pursuant to those notices are therefore recognized as lawful under Malaysian maritime legislation. In addition, Section 81 of the MSO 1952 requires shipowners and operators to ensure that the latest Malaysian maritime legislation, Malaysia Shipping Notices, applicable international rules, and safety-related publications are readily available on board their vessels at all times. Failure to comply with this requirement may result in a fine of up to Rm25,000 for each vessel, reinforcing the obligation of shipowners to remain updated with current statutory certification requirements and convention amendments affecting maritime safety, security, and environmental protection. As a regulatory practice in Malaysia, all Malaysia Shipping Notices issued by the Director of Marine must be complied with by shipowners and operators, particularly when they relate to amendments or implementation of international maritime conventions. Where necessary, the government may subsequently formalize these requirements by incorporating them into subsidiary legislation through publication in the Gazette or by amending provisions under the Merchant Shipping Ordinance 1952 following parliamentary approval. Only after such incorporation into domestic legislation can offenses relating to the implementation of Malaysia's 31 ratified international maritime conventions be formally prosecuted in Malaysian courts or compounded under the enforcement provisions of the ordinance. This structured legal process ensures that Malaysia's obligations under international maritime conventions are implemented progressively, transparently, and with full statutory authority within the national maritime regulatory system.
That's all from me. Thank you for watching.